Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the D-Shift podcast. And as always, I have an amazing guest that you're definitely going to want to listen into. So I want to introduce you to somebody who does something that's near and dear to my heart. So Michael Cohen is a divorce mediator, and he really specializes in helping parents to be able to get through the divorce process, to minimize the conflict, but most importantly, to focus in on helping kids who are going through divorce just like their parents are. We can't forget about the kiddos experiencing this. So Michael has a background as a CPA, but he's really passionate about taking on this new role as mediator and really helping people navigate this process. So Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mardi. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, and I am always happy to talk to a fellow mediator. So I know why I got into family and divorce mediation. What kind of got you into this area? Because I know you had a different, you, like me, had a different life before you became a mediator.
Yeah, I worked corporate. I led teams. I always was a people manager. I always knew how to get people to a North Star. So I knew I could do that. When I went through my divorce, I made the mistake that I helped coach people not to make. I just called a lawyer. I didn't know my lawyer was a litigator. I didn't know my former spouse was going to be very litigious. So we were in court all the time, and I saw how painful it is, and I saw the impact on my kids. In the back of my pocket, I said, when I am able to make a change, I'm going to become a divorce mediator to help people. And I got certified, and I worked a number of years after that. I built the business, and then I started it, and it started as a passion project because I truly want to help people get through this in a healthier way. It's become a business because it's been quite fulfilling and something I really enjoy doing.
Well, and I know we talk a lot about on the podcast about ways to save money in the divorce, and mediation can be one of those options to help you dramatically, I'm going to say that, dramatically reduce the cost of the divorce. But there's another side that is not financial, and that's the emotional impact on both yourself and your kids when you go through that back and forth to court and, parents aren't talking to each other and kids feel the tension and all that kind of stuff. So where do you see the biggest, let me ask you a tough question. Where do you think the biggest mistake is that people make during the divorce process? You said for you, it was going straight to an attorney. Do you think that's the same, that a lot of people do that?
I think it is. I think just like anything else in life, if you're not educated, you're not likely to make the best decisions. So when I do a consultation, I help people understand there's 4 different paths you could go to divorce. I talk about the pros and cons of each one, and I help understand their situation and which one or two might be best for them. So a lot of people think you pick up the phone, you call a lawyer, and you go. Well, number one, there are lawyers that are litigators and there are amicable lawyers. You need to make a distinction between which kind you need, because that will drastically change your divorce. Number two, a lot of people don't understand you can start with a mediator. The best thing you could do if you're in an amicable divorce, or you think you can be, is to work with a mediator, have them prepare your entire agreement, and then knock on a lawyer's door and say, here's our entire agreement. Can you help us finish it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So let's start at the basics. Can you describe for people what a mediator does and how they are different than an attorney in the divorce process?
Sure. So when you have an attorney, you both have to have one, and those attorneys both represent you, and they both try to get the most for you from their vantage point. And from their vantage point, that's money or time, and that's great. But usually couples could come together and make their own decisions. So a mediator isn't representing either spouse. The mediator is representing the process. And the mediator has a full understanding of all of the decisions you have to make. So the worst thing you could do is do it yourself and not be thorough, because that leads to a lot of post-decree conflict and you end up in court after your divorce. So a mediator understands all the decisions you have to make, and they facilitate a conversation. They literally get involved sitting in between the two people and interpreting, oh, I heard you say this. How do you think about that? And there's other techniques you use, but by putting yourself in the middle, you help them hear each other and you guide them towards a compromise. And it is phenomenal when I see couples working together and leaning on each other and looking to each other to make decisions. It's one of the most heartwarming things I see because they're going through a divorce. And as a mediator, you're able to get them to talk and make the best decision for the family. So that's probably what a mediator does, is sits between the clients instead of pulling them to the opposite extremes.
Right. And I always like to tell people when I describe it, I always say attorneys are looking for differences. Mediators are looking for commonalities or common ground that you can work together on. And let's face it, you built your wealth as a couple. You had your children as a couple. Why let some third person come in who doesn't know you from Adam or Eve and start telling you how you have to deal with your future? And that's where I think the power of mediation can really be.
I absolutely love that. If you think of anything in your life where somebody imposed a decision on you, you're more likely not to like it and have a grudge or have baggage about it versus the decisions you make yourselves. When you make your own decision, you understand what you gave up to get that, and it's valuable to what you got. The one thing I want to just throw out too, because I think there's an important distinction. Some people might think, well, if you're a neutral facilitator, how am I being protected? You could still be represented by a lawyer within a mediation process. So for the parenting side of things, generally you don't need a lawyer. You're making your own decisions about your family. For the finances, there are some areas for couples who have very disparate incomes or significant assets that might be divided in a way that's fair or unfair. Like I will always tell them before we start that session, this is a point where you might want to get some legal guidance. So when we sit down, you are educated about what your rights are. They could bring a lawyer into the session. They could get educated beforehand, but they'll always be guided to seek that education before we make decisions. And then even at the end of the mediation process, a lawyer has to review it and a judge has to approve it. So there's a lot of safeguards built in.
Yeah. And I thank you for saying that, because a lot of when I was doing a lot of the family mediations, a lot of times both parties had an attorney with them. If they weren't sitting in the room with them, they were available by phone. Like you can pick up your phone, you can call your attorney. The other thing is, and I believe I know you have the background in financial planning, but I think a lot of media, like myself, I don't. So sometimes a CPA would also come in, and both parties may have their own financial planners or advisors. Lots of different experts can come in. So yeah, you're not just sitting in a room. And the thing I like about your mediation, can you talk about like, how do you start working with people? Like how do you make that happen?
I get a phone call or I get a connection or whatever. I'm probably unique in the industry because I do a lot of consultation. Like I will talk to the wife for an hour, 2 hours, however many times. I'll talk to the husband. I'll bring them both together. I want them to be educated before we start. I want to make sure that they both understand the process and their questions are asked. Then I'll bring them together. And I tell them they need to assess whether I'm a good fit for them. But at the same time, I'm assessing whether they're a good fit for mediation, because some clients say they want to mediate to save money, but they're really not good mediation clients. And that's not something that I want to do. Once we start working together, I start with the parenting aspect. That's 70% of the process. I like to work on the kids because I could look at them and look them both in the eye and say, I'm certain you both want to do what's best for your children. And they both agree. And I start with the easy questions, right? And we start to build momentum. And after a few minutes, I say, this isn't that hard, is it? And they go, no, this is really easy. And it's really easy to help gain momentum that way. When we finish everything about the children, we try to put that on the shelf. Like we try to say we're finished, but naturally they could change it as we go along. And then we pivot to the financial piece, because I don't like the kids to be a pawn in the financial discussions. And I don't like them to use those as leverage to say, well, if I'm only getting that, then you don't get the kids this long. So I try to make it two separate processes, but naturally we could go back and forth. But I try to make it separate because I want the best and healthiest outcome for the children.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like if a parent is listening and saying, well, I get how this might help me save money, but you also talk about the positive impact that this process can have on the kids during the mediation, but also in their life afterwards. Can you talk a little bit about how you see mediation having a positive impact for the children and the family?
Yeah, I mean, people come into mediation. Some people do it to save money, and that is the biggest difference. It's so inexpensive compared to litigation. But this is what you just asked is the most valuable component of mediation, in my opinion. When a couple is married and mom and dad aren't on the same page, the kids know it, right? And the kids find the gaps in between. And especially when they're teenagers, it leads to behaviors that neither parent wants them to do. So when parents are united, kids understand there's a common roof over their heads. There's a team that's looking out for them. They can't play one parent off the other, and they know they have to watch their P's and Q's in a sense. So I tell parents that when they got married, they had a view of how they wanted their children to develop socially, emotionally, intellectually, physically. And that view is still possible. When you mediate, and when you co-parent in a very effective manner, and you're communicating and being flexible, and the kids see that mom and dad are still mom and dad. They don't have to be holding hands, but they're standing right next to each other and they're working together for the kids' benefit. They know that they still have a team that's looking out. There's not too many gaps to go find these unhealthy behaviors.
Sure.
So I think that's one of the best benefits when you litigate or even if you parallel parent, which is when you're not communicating and working really well together, the kids find those gaps and that's where their development changes. And that's where a child of divorce is affected in a negative way because there isn't the proper parental supervision at the time.
Right. And sometimes I think when people have kids and they go through divorce, those parenting roles really change. So I'm going to be very stereotypical. Let's say mom always took the kids to the doctor because, mom stayed at home and looked after the children, which is a full-time job. Dad did his full-time job out of the house, or the other parent did the full-time job out of the house. So then all of a sudden through the divorce, when the kids are with the other parent, that parent may be responsible for taking the kids to the doctor. And when parents have that understanding and trust that each other is going to do the right thing by their kids, that frees up that situation. So mom isn't sitting at home going, well, I don't want dad taking the kids to the doctor because he's never done that before. It just opens up that space of we're both here for the kids in our roles, in our respective roles in their lives. And that is so powerful.
Yeah, I don't want to oversimplify this because when you're in a marriage, usually a couple each plays to their strengths, right? So if one parent is really good at this, they handle that, and the other parent handles it. All of a sudden, when you're a single parent, you have to do the things that you're not that good at. So the dad taking them to the doctor might be late or might not ask the right question or it's a learning experience and that's a reality.
Right.
But you're 100% right. I often coach parents to not only handle both roles, but to communicate in a way where they're sharing non-critical information. So, for example, they're with dad and he took them to the park and somebody did a somersault and landed on their feet. If he tells mom and the kids come back to mom and mom says, I heard you landed on your feet on the somersault. That's wonderful. But the subtle part of that is the kids are very subtly learning mom and dad are connected. Mom and dad are talking to each other. We live in separate houses, but they're still mom and dad. And it feels so good for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I taught a co-parenting class for many years, the court ordered. I don't know if they have it. You're in the Chicago area, right? I think most states have it now. It's usually a 4-hour course. And I know one of the things that we used to really stress in the course was that it's powerful for you to tell your kids how much you love them, but it's really powerful if you can say, and I know the other parent does too. So the kids are hearing that both parents recognize that continuum of love and caring and support. So I'm just so excited that you focus on that. And I really want to stress for people that are listening, not every mediator does what Michael's talking about with the consultation before and the multiple sessions. I mean, I've seen mediators who literally schedule the mediation. Everybody walks in cold. They've got 4 hours of time and the mediator's just trying to hammer out some kind of an agreement. So make sure that just like you shop for attorneys, you need to shop for mediators, and you need to ask those kind of questions.
Yeah, I exactly what you said. There was a young girl in New Jersey who reached out to me. I was in a networking group with her, or a divorce group with her, and she said, I just walked out of mediation. It was 2 hours. I sat in, I didn't understand everything. They gave me a paper to sign. I don't even know what this is. Can you look at it? And I reviewed it, and I got to tell you, like 40% of the critical decisions were missing. And I was so grateful that she let me read it, because she was unprotected from so many areas that would have impacted her financially and her kids socially. So she ended up, I didn't tell her to change lawyers, but after she saw it, she got a new lawyer, and she went in and she added some additional language to protect herself. So it's really important to be thorough, and that doesn't add more cost. Like when I work with clients, it's not very expensive. I mean, an entire mediation is normally under $2,500. So, but we spend the time, we sleep on the decisions, we make the right decisions, and we're extremely thorough.
Right, right. And so, that is really important if you are hiring a mediator, to ask about that kind of stuff, because like I said, there's different styles of mediation, and that person that just wants to hammer through the deal may be the best mediator for some cases, but that doesn't especially when kids are involved, that typically is not the case. Parents need to have time to think about these decisions. And please do not default to the standard visitation orders of first, third, and fifth Wednesdays and every other weekend. That so doesn't work for kids. It so doesn't work for most parents. So, don't just default to whatever.
Mardi,
sorry?
That is so important. That is so important. I can't tell you how many clients come to me who have done their homework and they say, I want a 5-5-2-2 schedule. And I'm like, all right, let's put that to the side for a while. Can you tell me what your job is? How many days do you work from home? What are your hours? How much flexibility do you have? How about the other spouse? What are the kids' activities? And all of a sudden, when we start going through that, they realize, oh, this doesn't work. I can never possibly make that work. So it's so much better to customize the parenting schedule to the family.
Well, and so many parents nowadays too, Michael, are working multiple jobs. So it's not like, it's not the traditional leave it to beaver family. It's like there's all kinds of scheduling issues, and kids are much more involved in activities than they used to be. I mean, I work with parents where kids literally have like extracurricular after school activities Monday through Friday. So parents really have to think about, and the older they get, the more these things come into play. So you really have to think about them.
Right. And a parenting schedule isn't set in stone. Like a best practice is to update and touch base twice a year,
right,
before the summer starts and before the new school term starts. What schedules have changed? Where do we need to tweak this, and to work amicably to make it work for everybody?
And if once you get it done, if parents can agree on that, they don't have to come back to mediation. It's only if they can't agree on it, then they have to default to some other way to solve the problem. So I know we want to also talk a little bit about, and I think this kind of plays into this next question I'm going to ask you. How do parents help to minimize the baggage post-divorce of all the conflict that happened during and prior to the divorce? And I'm guessing mediation is a good way to start that process. But what else do you suggest, Mike?
I would say that's the one and only answer. Mediate and don't litigate, because, and I'll tell you why. When you litigate, it's about a 1.5 year process. It could be longer or shorter, but it's a long process. And generally your lawyers inform you not to make decisions with your spouse so they're kind of telling you not to talk to each other. So you're not talking to each other. There's tension. The kids see it, feel it, hear it. By the time you're divorced, you had gotten in front of a judge, and the judge had made decisions for you. And usually no one's happy. You're not happy with the judge. You're not happy with the tactics of the opposing attorney, and you're not happy with the behavior of your spouse. So all that stuff just stews. And I've seen people that go years and they're still talking about their divorce, about how unfair it was and how it didn't turn out the way they wanted it. But when you mediate, the mediator tells you to talk to each other during sessions, work together, so the kids see and feel and hear you being amicable. And it only takes a few months and you could be divorced. So by the time you're done and you made all of your own decisions, there isn't that baggage, because you made your decisions. It was a short process. Now the kids could start to flourish. The parents could move on. So the brevity of the sessions, of the process, the amicability, the communication, the comfort of making your own decisions allows you to walk without as much baggage as if you litigate.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is I work with a lot of my clients, have been in the divorce process for more than a year, like you said. And, that's when the resentment, I think, starts to build up, especially if all of the motions are being filed from one side, and it just gets really confusing. And we've got a little bit of time, so I want to just talk about this particular topic, if you don't mind. You said that sometimes there are people that aren't a good fit for mediation. Can you just briefly talk about who may not be a good fit for mediation?
Sure. I mean, I might flip that and say who is a good fit.
Sure.
So I would say, and this is what I tell clients, in order to mediate, you both have to be able to talk to each other. You have to be able to listen and hear each other. You have to be able to be committed to compromise together, and you have to be committed to being fair and transparent. So if there's trust issues with the finances, if you can't compromise and one person will not budge from their view, you can't mediate. Now, there are more extreme cases. If there's abuse or controlling behaviors, that's not going to lead to a successful mediation. But sometimes it will. I'm working with a client right now with one of the spouses extremely controlling, and having me in the room allows the other person to be heard, and we're actually making some progress. So there are some exceptions to that, but you basically have to be able to listen to each other, compromise together, and be transparent and fair.
Right. And that's, and I'm glad you pointed that out. That was the one that I was thinking of when I asked that question, is specifically if there is current domestic violence or current emotionally abusive behaviors. That's probably not, you can still mediate, but you need to make sure that you are protected in that mediation from abuse from the other partner. So your mediator should be aware that that's going on. And there are different mediators have different comfort levels. I know some mediators won't touch those kind of cases. Other mediators are like, yes, but we're going to check in regularly. We're going to make sure everybody's okay in the environment. But yeah, so I think that, like you say, just making sure that you're willing to be open and listen and be honest. But I'm glad the other thing, I could go on and on forever on this, but I'm so glad that you also mentioned if somebody's hiding finances or hiding assets. That's probably a case where you need at least a forensic accountant to come in and provide some information on what might be going on there. So.
Yeah, and there's plenty of guides out there where you could actually do it yourself without hiring a forensic accountant, because if there are accounts, you had to use your social. So, I mean, you could look at tax returns where you got 1099s, you could do credit checks, and that pulls all financial instruments under a person. If there's cash under a mattress, there's not much you can do about that, though.
Yeah, or a Bitcoin wallet or something. Those get a little harder, but most people don't do that. It's there. You just got to know where to look for it. So, Michael, this has been so wonderful. And I know we've chatted before, and I know we could probably go on for another hour talking about the benefits of mediation. What do you think of all the things we talked about? What do you want people to remember the most?
Probably be educated when you're starting to divorce. Just be educated before you make decisions, because that will allow you to make the best decision. And I would also add, remember, you don't have to start with a lawyer. You could start with a mediator, and it's the least expensive, most amicable, healthiest process. So you could try it. There's not a retainer. There's not a commitment. You could stop at any time. So if it doesn't work, you could go to a lawyer, but try to start with the healthiest process first.
Great insight and information. Michael, as a mediator, you can work with clients all over the United States. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. If people want to find out more about you or get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They could call my cell, which is 224-544-9990, or my website is michaelsmediation.com.
And I will make sure all that information gets in the show notes. And Michael, thank you so much for being here today and sharing all your wisdom and expertise.
Oh my God, Marty, thank you. It was a pleasure.
And I want to thank you for listening into the D Shift. And don't forget to tune in again next Tuesday for another episode. Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.